Good evening, members of the Library Community Center Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee and any members of the public that we have with us. I'm going to call the roll first and call the meeting to order. So I will do the roll call. Janet Ron is not here. Sheila Rossi. Kristen Dubé here. Leslie Albion Field here. Alexandria Levitt. Tom Afshar. Here. Rich Elbaum. Here. Tony Ho. Here. Jean Kim is not going to be here tonight. He apologizes. Bianca Richards. Here. Victoria is not here tonight. Dean Serwin. Here. Julie Wang. Here. And Jasmine Wong. We do have a quorum. So the first item on our agenda is public comment. Public comment on general items, non-agenda items. General public comment will be limited to 30 minutes at the beginning of the agenda, and if we have any speakers going beyond that, we take them at the end of the agenda. Do we have any public comment? In person and nothing online. There being no public comment and no one here to speak, we will declare the public comment period closed. So moving on in the agenda, do we have anyone with reordering of additions to or deletions with the agenda? No? Hearing none, we will continue on to the next item. Next item is the approval of the Library Community Center Comprehensive Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee minutes from the September 4th regular meeting. So it's recommended that the Ad Hoc Committee review and consider approval of the Library Community Center Comprehensive Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee minutes from the September 4th meeting. Is there any public comment on this item? No, no public comment. So any comment from the committee members, questions, amendments?
I move to approve the minutes of the Thursday, September 4th meeting.
We have a motion. Can I get a
second?
Sean? We'll do the roll call on that. Kristen Dubé? Yes. Leslie Albion Field? Alexandria Levitt? Sorry, Tom Afshar?
Yes.
Rich Elbaum?
Yes.
Tony Ho?
Yes.
Bianca Richards?
Yes.
Dean Serwin?
Yes.
Julie Wang? The motion carries. So moving on to our next item, which is note. So this next item, number 4, is an opportunity for you to see a first draft of the presentation that the consultant has been working on for the city council. And we're not going to spend a lot of time focusing on things that we've already seen numerous times. I think the important thing is for us to get to the kind of site options again and go through what we saw last time, because really your big job tonight, is to discuss and determine what recommendation the committee wants to make. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to the Group 14. We have Don Marquez, we have Vicki White, and we have Andrea Gibbert. Good evening.
Good evening. Nice to see you all again. So as Kathy said, we will be running through the presentation that we've prepared for the City Council to get your input on how we've kind of presented and summarized the whole process that we've been to together over the last 8 or 9 months here. So please let us know if there's any confusion. We understand it's a little awkward to be giving your presentation that's aimed at another group, but we hope that your perspective on kind of folks seeing this afresh will help us get this well tailored for that presentation. And as Kathy said, we're going to be running through the things that you've seen multiple times quickly and really focusing on those, the site options that we have been reviewing together.
And if you see anything subsequent to this meeting, you have time to let us know. So reach out and let us know if there's change.
Yes, thank you. Oops, there we go. So we'll start the meeting with a review of the project overview, goals, and process. Then we'll run through the site and building assessments that we completed together, the community needs assessment and the engagement summary, and then the preferred site strategy that includes the site and building options, the cost model, and ultimately your recommendation that you will be considering later after the presentation. And then finally, the next steps that would lead to the implementation of the project. So we provided an overview of the facilities that are at Library Park and the dates that they were established. Running through the project goals that we worked with both the project management team and the ad hoc committee on in our early meetings there to wordsmith. The full view of the project steps that we've been through, the project phases, and the community engagement and stakeholder engagement that we've been through together. Then we'll move on to the site and building assessment. So we'll review again the the site context information slide that shows where the site is located within the historic business district site and kind of the adjacent uses there, some key views and the connections to transit and bicycle and pedestrian routes. And the overview of the existing conditions of the library building, that it's got a complicated layout, not enough space for quiet or active uses or the collections that the community is interested in, highlighting that the library building is outdated and in poor condition, doesn't have enough natural light, and has some outdated critical building systems. Doing the same for the senior center there, that the size and layout aren't supporting the current range of programs that the community services team would like to provide to meet community needs. Some of the drawbacks of the multi-purpose room, trying to perform multiple functions at one time, no lounge space, and again, the facility itself is outdated. We know that the facilities sit within a historic district and on a site that contains historic resources, that those include the library's community room, the Morton Bay Fig Tree, and the historic districts it's both within and near. We've got the historical significance diagrams that you've seen, both highlighting it from above and from the side, which elements are of primary historical significance to the character of the site, those that are contributing to that character, and those that are not contributing. And our great historic consultants, Page and Turnbull, have provided some great views over time of what the library, what the community room has looked like and how it has functioned over time, including today's view. Again, touching on the historic context within which Library Park sits, that it's near and within some existing historic districts and near a potential eligible district, but that there are some uses nearby that are not historic. Getting into a little bit more detail here, we're looking at the massing or the size and shape of those buildings surrounding the Library Park site here to show, where or how the existing and potential future buildings would relate to those in terms of size and where kind of the larger masses of those buildings would sit, how they relate to the Morton Bay Fig Tree and the opportunity that we identified there for a prominent corner opportunity at the intersection of Fairview and El Centro. So a refresher on the parking considerations that we went through together there, that we have inventoried the existing street parking and noted the presence of existing offsite parking that is within easy access of the Library Park site, including the city garage there. Also, that we have verified with the city's planning department that within the municipal code, there's a provision that exempts new development within a quarter mile of an existing transit stop from on-site parking requirements for new development. And again, and touching on the fact that we did consider under-building parking, but we did not include that in the proposal because of the high cost. And summing up the information that we gathered from the community about their needs and interests. So we've gone through this with you again, looking at the peer communities nearby, some key takeaways that we've added to these slides that you've seen before, that the library is heavily used by the community, that visits per capita to the library are high compared to peer communities. the physical library collections themselves, those books and materials are heavily used, despite the common knowledge that maybe they aren't as interesting to folks anymore, and that checkouts are high compared to peer communities. Also noting that the library's collections are densely packed and occupy more library space compared to peer communities, which affects the browsability of those collections, people's ability to look and find materials, as well as the amount of space for seating and other library uses for all those folks who are coming to the library. In terms of the overall amount of library space per resident currently, the library has a moderate amount of space compared to those nearby communities. Moving on to the recreation and community services component of the project here. Again, we did a comparison of the indoor recreation space, the square foot per resident for nearby communities. This slide also provides context from the National Recreation and Park Association that has a nationwide survey showing that the typical range of for communities for indoor community facility space is about 0.75 to 2 square foot per resident. And South Pasadena's indoor recreation space is on the low end of the scale, both nearby and outside of that range, that nationwide range. So summing up those, the projected needs that we have assessed, so based on a future population of 30,000 people in 2045, which is our kind of future planning year there, I said that a little bit backwards. We're using a future population of 30,000 people based on the local planning agency projections and consideration of potential redevelopment projects over the next 10 years there. If we are looking at co-located facilities on the site, so a combined facility rather than separate facilities as they are today, that the overall space needs can be somewhat reduced because of those shared space opportunities. An example of that is the community room, which is currently programmed by both the library and senior center. In terms of library space needs, based on the current high levels of library use within the community and the community's library needs, the recommendation is that South Pasadena have a modern full-service library that supports community responsive collections, services, spaces, and programs. If that facility was to be a standalone facility, we would recommend a size range for that facility of 20 to 30,000 square feet. On the recreation side, as we mentioned, the National Recreation and Park Association planning standards for those indoor recreation facilities, which encompass both recreation, community services, and senior programs, they recommend our recommendation based on those standards is 0.75 to 1 square foot per capita of that community recreation space. Currently, the city has the existing Orange Grove Recreation Center and the Senior Center serving those needs. Applying that 0.75 to 1 square foot per capita to that future planning population would give us a base or range of recreation space needed of about 22,500 square feet to 30,000 square feet. Subtracting out of that the existing Orange Grove Rec Center space and the community and senior space that we are recommending in the site options that we will be reviewing later today, that would leave an unmet balance at Library Park of that indoor recreation space needs of about 12,000 to 16,000 square feet. Putting this information all together, the current amount of facilities, both library and recreation senior space at the Library Park site is about just over 27,000 square feet. Adding together all the 2045 space needs that we've looked at, both the low and the high end of the range, and subtracting out a portion of that for the opportunities for shared use facilities would leave us with a recommended facility size for a new facility of 27,000 to about 41,000 square feet. So to understand what kinds of uses that the community needed at the Library Park site there, we did a range of community engagement activities. There were community pop-ups, open houses, and workshops, a community survey that was conducted in online and paper format, and the meetings you have held here, these public meetings, and your input as stakeholders through the ad hoc committee public meetings. The topics that we covered in the community engagement were an assessment of the existing and future possibilities of the site itself, understanding the needs for library, senior, and community recreation programs and services, and the needs for the site itself to enjoy the park uses, and the needs such as parking and other needs. The engagement opportunities were concentrated in mid-March through June through the survey. There were also kiosks in the library lobby that had similar activities. We held those open houses and workshops on April 9th and 10th. And the great community services and library staff did those pop-up outreach at events throughout April and May. Getting a little bit more specific here, the types of questions that we asked included, what would you like to do at the new library? What senior and community recreation activities would you like to do at the reimagined campus? What would you like to do at the reimagined community facility in shared spaces that could be used by both recreation and library programs? What would you like to do at the library park campus itself outside of those buildings? And some demographic questions to understand who we are hearing from and how they reflect the South Pasadena community as a whole. So through all these activities that we completed, the total number of participants that we engaged was almost 3,000 people, which is a really great response rate there. The survey itself had about my brain doesn't want to say this, 672 respondents there. So a good proportion out of the total overall participants. So we mostly heard from residents of South Pasadena. About 4/5 of the people that we heard from were residents. We did also hear from some non-resident users of these facilities. And in terms of the geographic area of where people were living throughout South Pasadena, the distribution of people we heard from pretty well matches the distribution of population within the city. In terms of the results of this engagement activity, the top priorities that we heard for library spaces are books for all ages, quiet reading, work and study, children's play and learning, and using a library of things. For the senior and community spaces, we heard fitness and wellness, games and hobbies, having a senior lounge, and having space for the nutrition and meals were the top priorities. In terms of spaces that could be used for all of these activities, the priorities were watching movies, performances, and music events, having space for visual and creative arts, attending lifelong learning and classes, and cooking classes. In terms of the library park space itself, people wanted to come to enjoy the existing trees, attend markets and fairs, as well as community performances and events, and to just enjoy walking around the site. So that's a very, very quick wrap up of all that we've been through together here. And it leads us to the preferred site strategy section, which Andrea will take over.
Okay. Thanks, Vicki. So in spirit, we'll run through the first part of this fairly quickly. This all should be key information that we shared at the last presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stop and we can answer those along the way. So as we worked through that, our committee, the state strategy direction was to retain and renovate the 1930s community room building, to maintain a main entrance and plaza, and specifically if there was a new main entrance and plaza, that would be on the northeast corner of the site, and to preserve the Morton Bay fig tree. We also identified a couple of other building options developed that we should strategize when it came to the site, making sure that we keep in mind the emergency egress needs for all patrons, but specifically those of seniors, to make sure that senior programs and spaces are easily visible and on one floor, to minimize movement between their programs and services. Identify where their meals program and adjacent kitchen would be located. identify the new children's storytime space with the amphitheater for which the library has received a request, and to identify the types of entrances, including those that would be for general open hours, as well as those for after-hour use of the facility. With that, we developed 3 building strategy options in alignment with the city's funding capacity for the project. The first one being a renovation of the existing library, senior center, and the historic 1930s community room, which equals approximately 27,000 square feet. A new construction of a co-located library and senior center with the renovation of the 1930s community room, similar square footage as option A. As well as a third option of new construction that would bring the total square footage up to 40,000 square foot and require a 2-story facility. This slide illustrates the building programs, or what we would call spaces, within the 3 different options, and we've identified the space allocation between the option A of renovation, option B of new 20,000 square foot, as well as option C of a new 40,000 square feet. While we understand square footage is hard for the community to understand, on the next slide, we've identified more of the capacity of each of the different program spaces within each of the 3 different options as the number of seats that these spaces would accommodate. As they would move through between a renovation, a new build at 27,000, and how additional programs and increased capacity would occur in option C when we would increase the total square footage up to 40,000 square feet. We then identified or prepared some conceptual layout drawings. The first one being option A, which is the renovation of the existing facility. So maintain the community room and its current after-hour entrance or dedicated entrance for that particular program amenity, and its connection to the central atrium and conference room and staff area on the El Centro level here. And then as we move down to the Oxley level, maintaining the 2 separate entrances for the library on the left, looking at opportunities as we are renovating this to rethink the way the building is laid out, to potentially relocate different programs within the building and open up different opportunities for expansion and rethinking those program elements, but still maintaining a separate entrance for the senior program and their dedicated spaces. When we get into option B, here we're looking at a new facility while renovating the 1930s. So again, this is where we're prioritizing a new northeast entrance on a corner plaza that would feed into a central lobby that would facilitate access to this main floor on the El Centro level, which would serve as the predominant floor for all the senior programs and activities. And then as you would move down from that central lobby down and connecting to the Oxley level, relocating this new entrance and alignment, a shared lobby between these 2 floors, but this floor would predominantly be serving the library's needs. And then the last option here, option C, again, focusing that new main entrance on the northeast corner with the shared lobby. We've relocated the community room, and this option has expanded to kind of not be able to accommodate in the 1930s community, the 1930s building. And so we've relocated that community room as part of the new construction and repurposed the 1930s facility into a series of rooms that could be dedicated to senior and multi-use programs and classes. And then as that lobby connects down to the Oxley level, still this level would predominantly serve the library's needs and an expanded footprint, an expanded capacity. And then as we mentioned, this option C does require a second floor. And so up on the second floor, we would have additional multi-use community and recreation spaces such as creative arts and fitness elements that could be shared between the 2 uses of this building with opportunities for outdoor terraces up on this level. I think city manager had the opportunity to share this at the last meeting, so I'll do kind of a brief overview, but he had shared the funding capital budget, operating capital budget that was adopted in 2025, just sort of setting the stage of where the city's funding commitments have already been outlined or identified. That being the need for a fair amount of money for improvements for streets, and that there was a property tax measure being considered for this fall. Identified that the library and senior center options really from a funding capacity range between 25 to 60 million, and that proposed funding plan would need to be developed in conjunction with bond funding as well as potentially additional fundraising and grants, and that potential property tax measure, that there was a survey currently out into the community to understand the community's tolerance for a bond measure and potentially what that bond measure should cover, whether it was streets only, a mix of streets and libraries, and that the results of that were to be presented to City Council in November for consideration. And as the note says, this will be updated for council presentation as that information is currently in the works. As part of this project, we prepared a cost model. And that cost model identified 4 key components. The hard cost, which is generally what we would call the cost for the actual building and site furnishings, what the general contractor would be providing to sort of plan out the building and to build the building. Site cost, which would include all the architectural engineering fees, permitting, testing, and inspections. Escalation, and this is utilizing currently 4.5 escalation per year. And a number of contingencies within this project budget that were appropriate for this phase of planning, including a design contingency, which is included in the construction hard cost, an additional construction contingency of 10 to 15%, depending on whether it was a new construction or renovation, and soft cost contingency of 10% as well. And those are all fairly typical percentages for projects at this point in time. Here we identified the specific scope between the 3 different options, what that scope includes within these different budgets that we'll be sharing with you. So for the renovation project, we are renovating the existing facility. There is an allowance or a set amount of money set aside for some minor addition and subtraction of walls. It did include the children's storytime and performance space as identified by the previous bequest to the city. New furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It would bring the building up to current ADA and Title 24 compliance with remodeled bathrooms, new interior finishes, new HVAC upgrades, updates to the electrical and lighting. So again, that's just an allowance or an item. So there might not be full upgrades, but there is an allowance to update those systems as well as fire protections and to remodel the entry, children's, reading plazas, and some of those other wonderful site amenities that was identified by the community. When we get into new construction, still renovating the 1930s, but we have a brand new 24,500 square foot facility, which includes, again, that children's storytime performance space, new furniture, fixtures, and equipment. As with any new facility, it would be brought up to or designed to current ADA and Title 24 compliance with new restrooms, finishes, HVAC, completely new electrical, lighting, fire protection, and brand new plazas around the entrance and children's and reading areas. And very similar scope for option C, just a larger footprint of 38,000 square feet of new construction and renovation of that existing 1930s. The cost here include the scope that we just previously shared. And so when we think at option A, a renovation, we're looking at a low end of 18 to 21 million and at a high end of 22.5 to $25 million. These ranges are because we're at a very early stage and it's hard to identify. We have not engaged a number of engineers or a contractor or any construction management expertise. And so at this early planning level, it's best to have a range. There's just a lot of unknown conditions at this point, having not brought the full set of engineers on board to identify specific costs associated with all the different systems. When we look at option B, still renovating the existing 1930s community room with that new library and joint use senior center, a low end of 32.8 to 36.5 million, on a high end anywhere from 37 to 41.5 million dollars. And then for the largest option C, getting us up to that 40,000 square feet, we're looking at 47.5 to 53 million on the low end, and 53.7 all the way up to that identified $60 million on the high end. One thing we always want to do is come back when we've presented different options, is really to make sure that we've come back and as we shared in the beginning, we identified those goals. Do these building options that we're presenting meet those goals? And indeed they do. We are looking to really make an impact on the site plan, maximize the value of that facility to the community, as well as integrating those historical elements in a variety of new outdoor spaces for the new library and senior center. This would be a much more modern facility for the long term, focusing on multi-generational, inclusive, and really transformative spaces for the whole community, and maximizing the value of the library and community services with those identified shared opportunities within all three options. We are looking to respect the existing site and its natural historic features, including the Bay Fig Tree and the 1930s community room. And all three options will make the building fully compliant, including all site improvements, and provide easy wayfinding and convenient access for parking, whether you're accessing it by vehicle, walking, or other modes of transportation. And so with that, we're hoping this evening to really look for the ad hoc committee's recommendation, and this slide would be updated based on our discussion this evening. And then the last slide that we will present to council will be sort of the next steps, which will be for them to confirm the preferred building option, authorize refinements and any funding plans to accommodate that option, and then direct staff to potentially advance to schematic design or continuing to engage the community with refinements and development of the design into the next step. And I believe with that, that is the overall preview of the City Council presentation.
You guys have questions or comments for them, or do you feel like you're ready to start talking about what you would like to recommend to City Council? And I don't know if I'm talking about anything. Rich?
A question. There's a lot of slides. I defer to the staff and others, certainly to the city manager, to Kathy, as to what's appropriate for the council. There's a lot of great information. I'm just wondering, it seemed to me like there was a kind of almost equal amount of detail describing the process and the community engagement, which is important. But I felt maybe that was the latter part, which is to me what is really the most important thing. Is what are the different options, and what do you give up, and what do you get? We have kind of inadvertently given short shrift. So again, you may just want to look at that and consider consolidating some of that. Again, the process was great, but I don't know that that's as big a concern to the council and the community as the other things. And toward that end, and kind of in support of what Jean was saying, I do think there may be some other ways of kind of showing, in a sense, the headline, the conclusion at the end. So for example, that one slide where you list all the things. A lot of times when you're comparing it, it may be better to show the things that have like check boxes so you can see quickly which options have which things and then what the cost is. Because ultimately, I mean, I think that's the key decision that the council needs will be looking at. But I sort of one last, just a minor thing. you had a great slide on the project goals and building options, but I kind of felt like you buried the lead. It came toward the end. And I think it'd be better to put that up front so that people can see, keep that in mind, what the big goals are as they're looking on details. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I agree about everything that he said. I think maybe we could flip it and do, isn't this committee, aren't we supposed to be making the decision to bring to council? So it's like, are we actually bringing all three positions, or are we going to decide tonight? So really, this slideshow is not what's going to go and show with the council.
We would be adding whatever the recommendation is.
And then taking all the others out.
Yeah, well, no, I think that they would see the full range of options, but then.
But why? I mean, if it's our decision, if we're in this committee, so they need to see all three options. Oh.
And then you're giving them a recommendation and they make it.
Thank you. When it comes to our recommendation, are we just making a recommendation on kind of these options? Because we've had a lot of discussions and we voted on certain things like the parking or not to demolish the community room. Is there like a range of like other conclusions or recommendations that our committee has made in the past that should be presented to council? Or is it just like we believe option, B is appropriate?
I think it's your opportunity to share whatever you want to share with the council.
Because I think there were some guiding principles that we talked a lot about, and I think it would be important to kind of communicate that to city council that we had not talked about trees, and kind of what are about the parking and a bunch of other things I can't think of right now. But I think it would be good to kind of like, this is some of these guiding principles that we discussed and we really thought about a lot in this meeting. And this is kind of how we came to that conclusion. And here's all these steps we went through.
And I think that would be at a high level outlined in the staff report. The committee met this many times and this is what they did through that process. And here are the things they recommend. And it's not necessarily just we recommend option B. And that's all you're saying. I think it's up to you guys what it is that you want to recommend to them and to think about in terms of what you've thought about, what you've accomplished.
Us discuss that all combined tricks here on these fire instructions. Same size where it's 10,000 smaller words on the second. Those costs simply all in. And I think that we those services those services to but to Tom's point, is it just binary? You say, oh, we got these things and all of this, or is it, can we make that suggestion?
Your recommendation would be to the council that they look at that option and explore that. Do you agree with that, Todd? I mean, it's really for you guys to let them know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think Tom's point about the guiding principles, along with your point that there's something that is a little bit more than the 27,000 square feet that accomplishes some additional things for the community or goals. Feel free to communicate that. I think that's important. So obviously we try to give you a mid-min max type approach to try to spur the thinking and achieve different, what we thought could be, budgetary points along the way. But if you feel like we really like the middle option, that we'd like some more things added into it that we heard from the community or important to you, that's fine. I mean, what we haven't done, and what makes us, as she alluded to in the presentation, is we haven't actually started doing any design engineering. There are, drawing, the architectural drawings, and then basically have construction management requirements there. So these are very high level budget numbers. So it's possible that we could get to a B plus, with the budget that you're seeing B. We just don't know. We don't know until we start drawing and until we have some decent construction estimation going on.
Or taking to the voters.
Yes.
If you want a real library and a real senior center, we're going to have.
Right, and I think that's the question, right, to the council. So if that's what you want them to consider, then that's the recommendation.
So if I can synthesize what we'd like to take to council, it looks like if we look at the presentation, we go to page 31 to 32. It's essentially the community engagement results, right? So that is the result of the community engagement. 31 to 32 is the result of that. And to Rich's point, we can swim how we got to that. And I don't think that 20-minute presentation leading up to those results is necessary. The second portion, what we'd like to bring to them is the result of the committee conversations. And that seems to be mostly summarized in page 34. We should take a look to see if there's anything that we need to add, but for the most part, this looks like most of the major issues that we discussed that were consensus issues. A third item that I don't see here, which I would like to hear a bit more about, is the organization doing the presentation. They did a certain amount of research that I would like also presented as the third portion of what gets presented to the council in terms of we ask that question of, well, how many years are there left in the big tree anyway, right? We also have another question about some of the details I remember about the community. There are a few things that I remember that was specifically what they were looking into in finding the structural engineers. There were some things having to do with structural engineers, the city, the arborists. Those reports, I think, would also be relevant things to put reports to the city as major concerns. So I think we break it down into essentially community concerns, our council's consensus, as well as final findings of the historical and structural engineering reports, as well as the financial business aspect reports that I remember they were looking into. And those three aspects would then bridge into our final recommendation, which we're hoping to achieve that tonight, which is, pushing towards this somewhere between B and C. But I think where we had last left this 2 meetings ago was that, again, these are incredibly high level estimations of what B and C would be. These are in no way these hard and fast plans because they are not architecturally or structurally sound driven in any way. These are just rough sketches. So compiling those three different types of consensus into launching forward into the next phase, which we're actually looking for architects to create some solid plans so that we could actually have an idea of what funding we need to generate. I think that's where we had reached a consensus last time, was that city council then needs to get to a point where we have enough of a prospectus that we can start looking to apply for grants, as well as to look for some sort of funding matching, as well as to consider what our timeline is to put things into a ballot to look for community funding. So that would seem to be the next phase. Two pieces of consensus into some type of architectural perspective so that
necessary to show we did the homework, we did all the steps, so that people go back later and question what's paid. That record shows a very detailed, methodical process as opposed to shortcutting on that. Because later on, no one's going to go back and solve this problem. Check. Of how we get to that decision. Talking about structure.
Yeah, no,
That overstatement or not?
no, I think you're right. I mean, the context is important. To get into the record, you know, how you reached your conclusion, why you reached the conclusion, the ask for some D or B plus, however you want to bring that just for some context. I also agree that we don't need to take 20 minutes to get there. You know, that there's probably a few slides that succinctly can, you know, tell that story. But yeah, I think it's important for historical context as far as why this was made. You know, what were the principles you relied on to make the recommendation.
And yeah, I agree with you, Todd and Dean also. If you want to shorten this presentation, I really don't see any benefit or value, and actually I think it's distracting of these space diagrams. There's nothing more in these in page, 38 through whatever this is, the 40.
Yeah.
So that's not summarized on page 37. And really, if you look at it, there's no more detail. To me, it's just busy work that.
These are hypotheticals.
Exactly. Yeah.
Arguing this future.
Yeah, and you probably get people, hung up on, this children's space should be next to the restroom. Whatnot. So I would just cut that out. You have a summary sheet on page 37 that pretty much summarizes it, and leave it at that.
Report, can I ask you to speak a little bit to what the site plan itself, what the deliverable is? Because I know there will be an executive summary and all of these kind of appendices, right, that reflect the research that you've done. So some of these details that you're asking about should be available to council, but we don't necessarily need to put them on the screen and walk them.
Yeah, the final deliverable is a report, and all the exhibits in the presentation you've seen tonight will be part of that report, but doesn't necessarily need to be in a presentation to council. So the report would be available for anyone to read and to see the full story. But it sounds like, from what I can gather, there may be some abbreviation of this presentation to talk about some of the more key components that led to the recommendation, that being community engagement, the site strategies that we saw on page or slide 34, and then maybe some version of this summary of slides on this slide here, 37, that a shorter story might do well. But yes, the report would have all of this detail and all of these exhibits for council and any other community member once adopted to go through. Did I answer? Did I hear the question properly and answer it properly?
I'm gonna just mention Gene Kim isn't here, and he had some suggestions. Might be a typo, but he said after slide 61. You don't have it. Yeah, I'm not sure. He must mean PDF page of the packet. So I'm not sure what that is, but we can look it up. He said he'd like to suggest a slide that bottom line the options. For example, option A is the most expensive at X million. The cost square foot is X, but you get X, Y, Z. Option B costs X. It's this many square feet. So for that, you get these things. I mean, I think we sort of have that, but I think he's seeing it like a more of a bullet point view. So it's spelled out, and I'll share this with you guys and you can take a look at it. And again, he also thinks that we can tighten up the beginning and that we don't need to have them digest that much material. and trim some of that out. So I'll share his comments with you. Any other comments on the presentation itself? I think what we're hearing is that we want it to be more concise. I think Julia's comments are very clear, so we can go back and see that again, I think, and capture that.
Rich had some good comments too.
Yeah. I mean, I think we got some good feedback that will improve this very much.
It would definitely be nice to get one extra slide for them to report back to the findings, because I'm still very interested in what the result of their findings continue to be our report, engineering reports, and architectural historical. That's the one piece.
Have that information to put into someone.
Julie, are you saying, for example, the way that they have the information about the historic assessment, but other things too? Like what other features or factors that are significant that they discovered in their research that we need to call out? Is that
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Because I think they had some very specific questions. We spoke during our first or second meeting that they were supposed to, that they had spent time hunting down. Right? So I don't know what the specific questions was. What is the current life of the Morton fig, and what is the known arborist lifespan expected for the future, right? It's 99 years old. Only expected to live to 105, then it gets a moot point, because by the time we get the funding for this, it'll be a big tree. However, if it's 30 years old and it's got 50 more years left, then we need to plan around it. So that was a specific question we had. We also had specific question about which architectural features needed to be kept up, which versus which ones were negotiable because they weren't actually historic.
This slide deck in there. That,
I would say there was only one more thing, at least that I was quite interested in, that the historical person answered, which is, could you move the building? Which is something I was curious about, and he said no. So I don't know if that's worth putting in, but I thought that was an interesting point.
Yeah. And I think there was another question.
He said,
okay.
No, I think there was another question we had about the grading of this side entrance. See how right now it's steps, and I think that was one of the things that came up with one of the elderly community representatives. She had asked, with the stairs, this was the entry level, and I remember that we had a conversation about it being possible to have a smooth entrance from either this side or the back side. So those were things that were structural and
I guess it seems like then the question is, if we're renovating this building and we're keeping this entrance, whether the main entrance or the after hours entrance, is there a way, are we gonna be able to make it accessible, right? I mean, it sounds like that's, if we're doing things in this old building, are we gonna be able to make it accessible and modern when we keep it?
the reason I'm asking those things is because our next step, right, once this is presented as council, is for council to approve for us to move ahead towards actually soliciting architectural companies and these research questions, right? If we're accommodating for the tree, if the grading allows us entry for this versus that, like those are all questions that technically this group was this group was supposed to find for us that we paid for, and we would need that information to save the architectural, the extra step of them having to redo that exact same research. So since those are things we paid for, I would like them, and that would make things smoother when we can go to an architectural firms and say, like, these are our givens, these are the things the community wants, these are things that we've already discussed with the council, that we've already promoted to the council has approved our priorities from committee, then it's a shorter list that the architects have to. Then we can come through with B, C, and plus. And
I think a lot of that comes later. But I do understand, and I think it's a very important question, is if this becomes a main feature of a renovated building, it needs to be the main entry point. It can't just be a secondary point. So I think these are important questions. To me, that probably comes in the next step when an architect gets on board. So,
My guess is that whoever we would hire for that design element, if it's not Group 4, is going to insist on redoing that work regardless.
I mean, the answer is it's going to be really difficult, just from the topography of the site.
I'm assuming that whoever does the actual plan will have to dig much deeper into this, but some preliminary idea would significantly shift your budget estimates.
I think the main issue is that was unnegotiable.
And that's listed in.
Yeah, and that's listed on page 34, right? So 34 is what I is. The 31 and 32 are the page results. It would be nice to have those presented up front. And yes, like have the history of how we achieve that, but council wants to do recommendations. Essentially, 3 pages are ultimate priorities, and then page 37, 36, and 37 are the general proposals, and 45 are 45 and 46 general funding.
What's the next step? We give you
I think we've,
ABC.
well, so as far as the presentation itself, I think we've got a lot of really good feedback, and I think we can work with you forward to try to get it where we want it to be. And then as far as the question of the recommendation, again, you guys are going to discuss that, it sounds like. I mean, we've heard some good ideas, but if you're thinking and people are all sort of coming to some consensus on the idea that you like option B, but you feel like there's a step missing that you'd like to have explored, and somebody can move to, that part of the recommendation. But again, there may be other things that you want to say about, things that this committee has talked about and feels strongly about. So including, level access for seniors or whatever it may be. You may recommend such and such plan, but these are the things we also recommend go forward regardless. So.
Sounds like we didn't want A because two.
That's right.
So for this discussion happening now, it's B and Y, or because really we evolved to getting it to B, right? So A is here just presenting sort of why, how we got to B, into A.
I push back on that. again, as I said earlier, I think it should be presented that your choice, build something the exact same size that we have, build something that can double the size. One is ridiculously expensive, so don't do that. But to say that only just something that's the same size. So I think the way forward is where the community is asking something more than we are just new. Understanding two-story building, smaller first floor, smaller second. So it wouldn't be C, but it would be more than B, so maybe it's C minus.
So maybe
Exactly.
if we have a one to you, we agree.
So what's the range of need that would encompass all of our needs, what we could afford? And I think that's where they can't come up with any more B options for us.
So that's our especially.
But I think we don't even know what we can afford, and that's what I'm afraid, is that we're talking, B, B plus. I'm trying to fight for not A.
Yes,
Right now,
yeah.
because I feel we need to have a very strong message. We don't want A.
yes,
Don't even, it's like a non-starter.
yes.
We understand, of course, we want, B plus or even C, but we need to understand what the financial constraints are and I think that council needs to come back and kind of give us a range, and then we have much better tools to work with to understand if it's B plus, maybe B minus, who knows?
I think that's exactly right. We told them not A, and we want basically the most we can afford. It's not available funding, whatever sources, including asking the voters to come up with some.
Also, you also always need to include, the needs, so don't forget that 2045 needs was, I think, the B option, whereas that's the low option, 2045 high needs is the really expensive one, so I think we also always have to highlight, there's needs here.
I don't think B is.
If you look on this one, this on 25, it's pretty similar. So you look at existing facilities, it's 27,510 square feet, whereas if it's 2045 is low, 27,320 square feet.
It's that should be some history happen. I just don't agree with you. We already have shared space between the senior center and the library. That's not accommodated. So it's like they're taking out somehow.
Well, that aside, you can still see that it's their low and high. So just, I think we also have to put the needs in there and say, based on the needs that they found and provide a recommendation. So each high land somewhere in between.
You might also want to think of it as, we have the slide that shows what we get with the different options. So if we know with option A, we're not going to get fitness room, and that's really important to you. I mean, that might be part of the reasoning in terms of why you would recommend one option or another. And Victoria, just so I can share this before I forget to do it, she said, you have this in front of you, but she said, based on the outreach efforts of the most recent realistic options brought to the committee, she would move to recommend city council option B. Just so you know, that's where she's.
So just to say, to these,
I think we need we want city council to come up with enough money for people, right? And then hopefully, you know, further, you know, additional funding, maybe we'll get more, but I would kind of say the starting point for us to really move forward with this is put enough money on the table that we have feet. And then, maybe this group can strategize how we make it a difference. What do you see?
So it sounds like the goal of this presentation to go forward to council is, number one, to summarize the findings. Number two, to put forward our recommendation that A no longer fits any of the needs that we've summarized in Part A. I think one of the things that would help, I think that were suggested is for us to have a slightly more clear understanding of what you're giving up between A, B, and C, right? So if you compare currently pages 42, 40, and 38, right? So you have building option A, building option B, building option C, the El Centro level. If you look at the way they compared it out for us, between A and B, it's actually just a mild diminishment number of seats. So for example, library browsing, in A you have 24 seats, B you have 4 extra seats at 28, and at C you have 36. So between A and B, A shape here, honestly, I think it's harder to prove why A doesn't move. So I'm wondering if that can be made a little bit more clear. Between B and C, you can clearly see that there are things that you lose, right? So between B and C, you lose the study group, you lose the fitness studio, you lose the multi-use classrooms, the space. So between B and C, you can see clearly what is the loss, right? So, but between A and B right now, it's not very clear. What we're pushing is that we want to say it does not meet our needs. That needs to be a little bit clear. The reason I say that also is because if you look at building option A right now, it says, you know, conference room would have 8 seats. I have yet to meet an effective conference room that has 8 seats. So I'm just wondering if this number was created in the initial proportion when they were looking at the money, just to find a way to make it all add up. But as a story, it doesn't make sense. Right? When you look at the labels, you're like, oh, we had a conference room in A and B, and they're equivalent. So I'm just wondering if we're pushing is that A is not an option, and we can make it clear why A is not an option based off of what is it that we create.
Maybe.
I think that it seems like there's some confusion around this idea that we need check boxes, right? Like not just a list of words. So we're going to get it with this, but not with this, to make it really visually clear. And I think it's sort of what Jean was saying as well, is trying to really make it more clear that with this option, you get this, with this, you lose this, you know, just make it easier, because I think it is hard. I'm trying to find the slide that I'm thinking of.
Page 8 and 9, slide 8 and 9.
8.
They want to say what.
You know, we pay, you get ADA in every option, you get this in every option, but you can't.
We should highlight the kind of the problem with the building, the low ceilings, the lack of natural light, you know, the kind of the maze of stairs that are very confusing.
Yeah, complicated.
Because you're not going to fix that by wow. You're just going to put a paint on the wall.
Because right now, if you look at page 47, which is a summary of what you get with scopes A, B, C, purely visually, it looks like you get more for A. But the list for A is significantly longer than like, wow, we can keep the original space and less expensive, and we get so much more. To Dean's point, right? It doesn't create this story that 40,000 square feet extra is going to buy you a lot more stuff. If you were to look at page 47, that C makes the least financial sense.
need to adjust the results that we turn in these.
Just to that, page 47, I think what everybody's agreeing is that above all, A isn't sufficient. I think that there's a lot of things like Tom mentioned that maybe should be listed under A, not as a plus, but also as a minus, if we do that. And even the things that are chosen, I get that from Kathy's perspective and from Lucy's perspective, there's a lot of things that we will get that they'll be able to do if we do B or C, that we won't be able to do certain activities or other things, and somehow that gets missed here too. So I think if one of our goals is to say A is not sufficient, we're really not making a good case against
it. Somewhere, I think perhaps slide 37, we should call it.
Maybe we need to go back to the traffic light thing we had before, the
The check, yeah.
check boxes
the
and the
X
X's
and
and
the-
the green, red circles.
I think there's a way to visually do this. I understand it.
I think it'll be cleaner than this list as well.
Yeah.
You will see a side-by-side comparison.
Well, I think part of what we were doing on 47 was, we wanted there to be this lowest cost option, and we wanted it, here's what's good about it, because, we wanted it to be a viable option, but you guys are saying, you don't want to do it if you can't do B, is what I'm hearing. Like, you wouldn't support a $20 million renovation. That's all we can do. If that's what we can't get more money. Just saying, don't even do that, can't do it, And I don't know if we have to get to that level of detail now, but it seems like that's.
Well, I think if it's presented, it's an option for the council certainly to consider. I don't think anybody here is saying, don't tell them there's an option A. I think what we're saying is we need to be clearer about what you're not going to get if you have. And then it's your choice.
Absolutely.
The question though, isn't it not just be clear on what you're not going to get, but be clear on that this committee, the reason this committee is recommending B and C is because of the deficiencies in option A that we cannot achieve.
Right there. So it is actually
But it also improves circulation.
yeah, just straight square. Just the way that it's written, it looks like. And I agree with that. Just straight out on the divisions are, I can tell.
Yeah, I think that option B and C need to have a total. I think it was 3,000 plus 27,000 because there.
Yeah, because the map is out of on page 36. You look at how 36 allocates program space. It makes option A look like the greatest. Right? And if you look at it, you compare any of these categories. It's like, oh, for category A, your community center, your senior space, you get 3,000 square feet. In the other two options, you get less than 2,000. If you look at it.
But ultimately, it's because sure, you just wake up.
But it's
But can't get tax money. I mean, that's why it gets these.
To be honest, with now looking at these numbers, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, they don't, something just that.
Why they don't have that. I think that, to Tom's point too, you know, if an entry is 1,000 square feet in this building, it has low ceilings, it has no windows, it has, you know what I mean? Like, it's not all about square feet.
Yeah, there's qualitative things, it's not, this is simply quantitative, and that's why I think from your perspective and your perspective in terms of the senior center, there's truly important.
All right. Oh, sorry.
So the senior center is one big room with a screen that doesn't really create smaller spaces. Although I guess that could be remodeled.
And I don't know, Dawn, maybe you can speak to this and just sort of remind us, I mean, these programs, these square footage numbers are based on your assessment of library, recreation, senior programs, attendance, right? I mean, this isn't like, I mean, yes, you're trying to squeeze it into the square footage that you have, but it's, those numbers are based
No,
on.
well, yes, and it's based on your current collection. It's based on, the current square footage as we look at option A. It's what you currently have. And I think, looking at the parameters of the funding, it definitely, is what framed option B. And then option C, gives us the flexibility to look at kind of the full complement of spaces at a more comfortable size. And so there is a range in all of these program numbers, and that's what reflective of the range in the square footage. I would say that the qualitative things we can certainly capture, and we can certainly develop, the qualitative things that we cannot improve with the renovation. But the renovation, again, is, it is not just a refresh, it would be a renovation of the existing building. And there is some money in there. And I'm just trying to, everyone understands the building has terrible deficiencies now, but for the budget that we're showing, it would be a renovation. And so some of those things could be improved. But basically the ceiling heights, probably the vertical circulation that you have, some of those things, those parameters are probably out of the budget. And so I think the qualitative summary is a really good suggestion on, what we can achieve with option A or cannot achieve in option A that we can in option B and C.
While we're looking at 36, I think one piece of information that may help us understand why option A is insufficient is to understand what our current baseline is, right? Like for example, if we look at the children's space, their option A gives it roughly 30 acres and square feet. Option B would move us up to 4,200. Option C would move us up all the way to 4. But having an idea of where we are currently helps most people envision what that means, right? If I tell you our current city space is at 3,800, people can quickly tell you that's not enough. We need more space. If we have this request for the children's amphitheater, there's no way you can squeeze that in, plug in the space that we currently have existed. Easily tells you option A is not an option. So I think that maybe a piece of information that would help us if people can easily compare what currently exists, because most of the council members I attend is in our libraries and can easily imagine, well, if the community entry is currently 450 square feet, then going down wouldn't make any sense. If our current senior enrichment space is already this amount, and going up or down is not going to sell that based on.
Did that make sense to you, team online? I mean, I totally agree. Like, it's hard for me, if I had a column here where it said children now, it's 2,000 square feet. Then I know how big children's is, but down there, that tells me something when I then see 2,790. So I don't know if that's possible before to add.
Well, you should add a column, just the existing conditions, and then do the actual square footage that we have today.
Yeah, we have that information. It can be added. I also, like square footage numbers are a number, but the size and shape of the rooms and the efficiency of the rooms really help tell, as Dawn was saying, sort of how the room may function. It may be bigger, but if it's not the right proportion or in the right location, it can't have the flexibility and functionality that you're looking for. So in many cases, we don't really talk about the sizes or square footages. And, I would probably recommend that you use slide 37, which is sort of more of the capacity, because in that slide you can sort of see while the spaces may be the same, they have in most cases less capacity because we're trying to accommodate a use within existing walls as opposed to accommodating programs within a space that was, designed for those more modern function of the space. There's some deficiencies there when you're working with these existing walls.
So a recommendation for page 37 is instead of having 3 separate columns, because it makes it very difficult for us visually to have a checkbox evaluation of baseline A, B, and C, right? For example, if you consolidated that into one column to the left of each of these program spaces, and then you have baseline A, B, and C, so you can easily compare across them which ones, what the expansion would be. So for example, if you have in row, the first row, log, right? You have what the baseline currently is, then you have A, B, 10 seat. Well, this one's a bad comparison because they're all the same. But let's say you go to library adult space, right? So you have library adult space as your first column, which tells you what the category is. And you have column 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is baseline A, B, and C. And you can easily compare currently how many seats we have in adult room space, how many option A give us versus B versus C. Then the ones that have nothing in that area, option A can provide us nothing in terms of the makerspace, or nothing in terms of the outdoor closet. That might be an easier visual for us than the 3 separate columns that we find on.
So you want like program space across the top.
Yeah, so you have, just imagine like basic Google spreadsheet. Just make it look like this, but
Do we really need more though, because isn't
well, A is the reno, right? So what they were saying is the idea of the reno is it's changing up the flow of things. So it does help us to know where the feng shui things will improve suddenly actual seat space versus where they actually decrease it. So I think it would be helpful for us to know. And it just gives us a comparison, right? If you say, for example, if you look under teen space, 12 seats, or children's space, 40 seats. I've been in the children's space. I cannot imagine there being 70 seats for children for a story time performance, which is what option A claims to be plus. But between option A and B, it's only a difference of 10 seats. Again, that would make me think that option A would be the better thing for the block. But if we know the current baseline is already at 80 seats, that's why I would argue baseline in terms of either seats. I think I agree with you before in that seats probably tells a better, more effective story for purposes than square footage.
I totally agree with that, and I think if we're going to do the option summary for 47, I think pairing 37, 47 closer together would help the council sort of look at the qualitative and the quantitative.
Agreed.
You can sort of see an evolution. I like that. And B and C drastically, so you can sort of see. That's
and with that development, because if you have this chart where you can see, oh, B doesn't get us a damn fitness to that helps us with funding because we literally look for some government grant wants to encourage fitness in our elderly, and they're like, Shaban, right? We pay for one piece of seat, and we can basically create money, be attractive to the community to pay for certain ideas, education, bigger spaces. So I think having that type of side by side comparison, starting off with what we currently have, where A, B, and C take us, allows us to encourage council to walk towards that conclusion of A, definitely doesn't it's pretty much what we currently have. B is slightly better, but only minimal compared to C. But what are the pieces of C that we might be able to find additional funding?
Yeah, I think just to bring this into I think not sure what you're saying is it probably makes some sense to identify what B plus is, and that can easily be sort of highlighted areas. This is our recommendation. We'd like these areas to be more of a focal point. This is the kind of the plus part of that. The problem with the approach that we're taking is there's just not a lot of grant money out there right now. And when you see a base pot of 50 or 60 million compounding at 4.5% a year, we can't find enough things to keep up with inflation. So likely the way that this will work is defining what B plus is. I think you can highlight some of these areas that you just don't feel like are still adequate in B. Because really when we get to the council, the discussion is this. We have $150 to $200 million of needs for the roads out there. I mean, I don't think anybody will argue about that. So the question with we're getting ready to start surveying the community, trying to understand what community tolerance is going to be. And then there will be discussion with how much money can the council, will the council, if they think they feel comfortable, let's say we go out for a $75 or $80 million bond, just for argument's sake. Do they feel comfortable keeping off $25 or $30 million here? And then I think it's been brought up by several of you, at some point you get into design engineering, the construction engineering, you start sort of, giving them a budget to work with and work backwards, which is the frustrating part of this, right? You don't know exactly what the budget is yet. The council's got to be able to give us some direction. Are they comfortable peeling off a proportion of that full bond proceeds if the voters approve this for this project? So I think the safer way of doing this, because we're just so high level, is identifying what B plus means to you. If there's areas here you go, look, we get B, but if there's an opportunity, if we want to establish the budget to improve these areas, then what are those areas that we can highlight to communicate to the council? And that's probably about as good as it's going to get right now until we get drawing here and figure out how to make the budget work.
So I believe you said previously that there's a bond that's about to fall off.
Yes.
What is the equivalent if that bond were to be reissued with the same obligation? How much would that be?
So our early projections right now is we would be able to support an $80 to $90 million bond issue over a 30-year period, and without increasing the rates on the residents because of the way that our PAD works here. So we basically are filling that gap with little to no impacts. On the flip side of that, against this is what we're not realizing the savings. But that's sort of the outside parameter that we're looking at for that reason.
So the message that we can make to our voters is, without increasing what we've been paying at all, we can get $80 to $90 million.
Right.
So if you have a temperature to increase at all, we can get X.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to keep this as high level as possible. The reason that works is you don't issue the debt all the time. We have to issue tranches because of arbitrage rules. A library changes them. So that really would have to talk to the council because you can't go part of the library. So it changes how we think through how we finance the building. So we'll have to, if the council's okay, if they want to say, you know what, and staff go off and take $20 or $30 million and see what we can make happen, we're going to have to come back to them with financing options and how this works. But because this is one project, one shot, it changes that. So there could be.
How separated are those tranches?
If it was a road program, we'd probably be issuing $5 to $10 million every few years, as we needed it. That way we don't have to worry about the arbitrage issues. For a building project like this, you're gonna have to issue the money all up front, so you can pay the contractor. So just sort of, so what that means in a long-winded way means that there could be a few years where you're actually increasing your tax burden because we're having to upfront some of that bond. And we haven't been running those scenarios yet because I have no clue what the council's going to do on this. But I think practically speaking, identifying in a chart like this where you would want more time and effort spent once we have a budget from the council is probably the best use of the time.
And I think to do that, to Julia's point, if we had this structured in a, here's all the things, and this is the option that gives you this or doesn't give you that, that would make it much easier for us, because right now, we've got to digest this information.
Yeah, the way the process is set up is a little unfortunate in that regard. I mean, if we were actually in the architectural drawings with these construction estimates, we could have a much different conversation. So right now, we're just sort of at the point where we're having to sort of talk to the council about, generally we're going to need $30 million, whatever it may be, and it's really, I find my CFO and I start working on various scenarios to present to them, saying, "Are you comfortable with this? Do you think the community will support it?" Because obviously they're going to want to know, what's your spending plan? What does it mean to my property tax? So I think for purposes we didn't contract the scope of service, which you've all hit on, that gives us that granular level of detail that we kind of want to hang out. So
no, I understand that completely. I was more to the point of it's challenging to look at this and go, okay, what does C give us that B doesn't?
Yeah.
And of what we have B and C, it's harder to, because they don't line up, the actual roads don't line up because they're different sizes in B than they are in C. But I think that if we were to take Todd's approach, which I think is a wise one, multi-purpose room is something that I think every survey result said they wanted, whether they said it or words or not.
So I think that's one of the things, right? The first half of this summary that we're sending over to council results, community engagement results, or community meetings, results of fours investigations. Second half is recommendation, and we're asking the board to come up with a clear, almost written spreadsheet version of what spaces would be included in the baseline ABC so that you can visually see what the trade-off is. And I think if we have that type of grid, we can correlate between results as well as the spaces. For example, if you look at pages 31, 32, that's how we community prioritize these spaces, right? So if you look at our grids, if you see, for example, that option C will get you the end fitness space where option A is not. You could literally highlight in certain colors in community separate lines. Like highlight how, the number one thing the senior citizen said that they wanted by 24.4% was a fitness space. So that way the council would be able to see visually, the difference between A, B, and C is that only C would offer us this fitness space, which 5% of seniors support that future point of
Ford, can you hear us? Can you hear me? If I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So the multi-purpose room and the dance fitness space, can those be the same room?
A multi-purpose room can be used for fitness. They typically are not the same room as a Group X dance room. A Group X dance room, you may want to have mirrors, you may want to have TRXs on the walls, you have more storage. It's a different type of room. And your multi-purpose room is more of a large gathering space, an event space, a large program space for speaker series and things like that. And so, yes, you can use the multi-purpose room for fitness and exercise. but they are not the same room. And when you have enough square footage and you can afford both, you would be able to program both. And, for a community of your size, if you had more of the recreation components and the funding for it, you would want to have both.
Not easy to afford. So my point is, we identify, again, like it's great to have here, she's done this whole time. If we're going to say, okay, we want B plus, and the plus is, we want a multi-purpose / dance room, we want to bump up all the other things by 20 or 25%, then that gives us a clearly articulable position to put forth the council.
I think that's a question that Group 4 doesn't really need to answer. I think we just need them to create the presentation that demonstrates that, because that's something that we would then put forth to the architects, right? Because that's where the rubber needs to go in terms of actual design. Because yeah, it really comes down to it, like good we want to sell to the council right now is just the fact that this is something that we can't get with A, we get something in C. These are the differences right now. Issue cost and highlighting these are the results of the engagement of the community of prioritizing. So that way we get Group 4 to give us a presentation that walks council towards this decision. Like, yes, we need at least B, but we actually want something that trends towards C with certain elements from C that we actually want to prioritize taking, so that when we then procure an architect, we can ask them, so what do you think?
I don't want to scare the council away from C by saying, yeah, both of these things, and then awesome and C. So,
yeah, I just don't think that's a question that Group C can or they just need to give us a presentation.
I don't think it hurts to at least put out those things that you feel are missing that the community wanted, because I can kind of view that as like some sort of performance goal. Once we get into, actually designing the facility, we start cost estimating it. Maybe we live with a 750 square foot space instead of a 1,200, but at least you've got that space. And so I don't think it's a bad exercise. And, there's no rush to make the recommendation tonight. If you would like us to work with the team here and come back to try to put that grid together one more time, I mean, we can do that.
so I thought we had a clock team.
We're still, we haven't even kicked off the survey of the community yet. We won't even be back to council until probably November with the results of that. So, I mean, we need to take a couple more weeks to put that data together for you.
Oh, that'd be fabulous. I thought we had a meeting with answer tonight, so you can be prepared for council.
Well, I mean, if it's the second meeting in November, it just doesn't matter. I mean, we got a year before this is even about, if I was supposed to do that, so
look at it differently presented.
yeah. Based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like I don't think it's pressure you. So, I mean, if you want to put that data,
is the survey you're trying to assess kind of tolerance for. Will it mention at all anything about library?
My intention is yes to mention it. Would you support? Our regulator is really the outside of that bond. Right now, we're assuming it's an $80 million issuance, which keeps us within that parameters that bond is falling out from the school district. Would you support this? And we just got our data back from the assessors, so we can tell you that you've got $1 million home may impact your taxes $400. But in order to get roughly half the city streets done, perhaps build a renovated library with or a new library with you,
support this tax measure. So we're going out to the community now to ask which, are they both important to them? If it has an impact of $500 per million, then I think that's pretty close. Would you support it?
Would there be any advantage to having this come before, because I thought this was going to come to the council before the survey goes out, because given that most people, including many of us, before we learned so much about how we compare to other cities, really weren't aware of kind of what's needed for the library. I'm a little concerned that you may be asking, maybe doing a survey on something that people don't have enough information about to make a good.
I think we probably got I don't see any circumstance where the council feels optimal for that bond issue. And I don't even know if that's support a library, or I'm sorry, support of issuance, 85, 90, we haven't talked about it. Basically, when we threw the number out, I got real quiet in council chambers. And so, everybody knows that once the street goes, and it's like, oh wow, that's a lot of money. And so we're basically trying to talk to the community. They say, is there support? Do you see this as a need? Do you support it? And my intention is to put the library. How do you fill up the library? If it was included in a property tax measure, would you support it? So at least you have some idea. And we will probably just use the number, the $80 million numbers, the outside, so we can provide context for what might increase the property taxes. It really doesn't matter if it's restricted to library. It's the amount of money that the community will tolerate. But we'll probably ask a couple different levels. That way we get back to council and say, look, here's what we heard generally about the impacts. And this is what voters want when there's a specific spending plan. My students can how schools get done. We're going to go ask them a series of those types of questions. And then they can decide, what they want to place on the ballot.
I guess my own suggestion would be that as you're shaping the specific questions on the survey, you get some thought to the fact that people they know that they're repaying parcel payments for the library, right? And that they don't know some of these facts. And sometimes there's a way in the survey you can ask the question, you can present it in a way that you're also providing some of the facts to help them understand the situation.
All right, I would pay tax.
I'm still confused of, I thought we've been discussing that reissuing this would not increase tax. Are you saying would increase tax?
Well, you've got a bond issue that is falling off the school district next year. Mm-hmm. And the idea would be that how much could you size so that voters would then expect to see a decrease in their property tax. So the question really is, would you support an amount that kept your property tax bill relatively stable versus seeing a decrease? And then you'll care how you ask it.
Yes.
So most people are going, I don't think decrease my tax bill. So it's really that's where we're still working with the team right now as far as how to explain that.
But if you preface it that it will increase your taxes by $500 per million, when it's not actually going to increase yours, it just won't decrease by that amount. Right. That's a very different. That's like corporate earnings. We didn't make our corporate earnings because we lost money, and we only had 8% increase, and we budgeted for 10% increase.
Yeah, and we have to be. I think the thing I'm most concerned about, to be honest, is I don't know the school districts. They may go out with smaller. I have no idea. So I hear you, and I think your point's well made. We haven't got the survey developed yet. We're having all these arguments behind the scenes right now about what to ask and how to ask it. But I always put myself in the mind of the critic, right? It's like, I would love to see my property taxes decrease. So we just have to be very careful how we say this and manage their expectations, because the other side is we never want to be accused of misleading. So we just got our data back. We have an idea. We can sort of extrapolate out what's going to happen to those in the next 2 or 3 years, and that'll probably form the basis of our questions.
So,
just to clarify, are you saying within the question you are at some point going to ask about the library?
That's my intention.
Okay, so then I would have to agree with Rich. I'm a little concerned that people don't understand the state of the library.
So,
So we can add questions, yeah.
so to that point, circling back to the library piece for one of the pieces that which we discussed, we are first establishing community engagement, establishing a website that was to have this transparency to the community about kind of this vision for the future, right? And I think that it may be helpful to have this piece to actually have a more focused presentation that we've already discussed, and have that focused presentation really point towards what the community vision is, what our committee consensus is, what that would mean in terms of the future library, and have those results available on the website. That was something that we can push and communicate. We were encouraging people to go on the whole survey, and so ideally that's a consistent part of our library PR regarding this process. And so ideally, some information in the survey would put them back to our library website, which would have the results of this community engagement. Right? So we told people, you're filling these out. Thank you for coming to the farmers market, the music festival. You're filling these out so that we are compiling your interest. And so ideally, we should have a targeted report that shows them the results of what they wanted correlated with potential future plans are, so that it ties into perhaps a portion of the city fund for keep everything very consistent.
Yeah, we can do that, and certainly even point people, we just created a budget last night to start creating some community newsletters. You know, there's nothing wrong with sharing the results of this, you know, and why we reached that conclusion. So there's a period of time where we can educate the community, and then before we have to stop advocating and be perceived as advocating. So when we've got vehicles, we can do that. At the end of the day, what we want to know is this adding the library to a stream measure help hurt or is it neutral? If it's neutral or helps, it's great. So we just don't. But that's ultimately the reason.
I guess just in terms of Dean's earlier question, I would strongly recommend, if it's at all possible, to have the presentation to the council before the survey goes out. If it's not, to figure out, I would say, what you're allowed to do. Again, because I know there's laws about that, and also just kind of politics of it. But I would love if there, you know, before the survey goes out, if there was a headline all over the place that says, you know, community asks for this from the library, South Pasadena ranks, you know, next to last in San Diego Valley in terms of library square footage. There's another really case that if that's not in the public consciousness when the survey goes out, I just think we're putting ourselves in disadvantageous position.
How much time do we need to do that?
Or did you hear Doug's question? He asked, how much time do you think we need to figure the way we're conveying this information and bring it back to show these guys?
You know, I think it sounds like you're asking us how much time to get a revised draft of the council presentation based on the direction tonight. And, you know, I would say just probably 2 weeks to get a draft, which, you know, during that 2 weeks, we could review with staff, Kathy.
What we do is, if we can meet before the next council, before the November council meeting, and keep this on the agenda.
Keep this on the 11.5 agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think we'll be wrapped up with the community survey by the 19th, but just in case, if we could get back together in 6 weeks or whatever, before we meet next week council. And we will hold off the survey for another, we're not even ready to put it out there for another couple of weeks. We'll be wrapped up in about 2 weeks. So we can try to stage it that way. I know what you're saying. And if the community hears some of this, it may affect the way they answer the question. So
if there's another way, the best way to do this is through a council presentation. I'm also assuming it wouldn't be a
appropriate for us to like release all of this without it going to the council
Yes.
first, because we're, yeah, no, I agree. I think you bring up a good point, and if we can try to keep this on the November 15th, we have to adjust our schedule a little bit, and the committee survey a little bit, you know, we can sync that up in time. We've got all support to be working on this, and we can actually continue putting together newsletters and educating the community up until the council decides to put this on the ballot. Once that happens, I have to be right.
A couple of points. I've been involved in a lot of including both Measure S and the removals of it, and the original Measure SP, which was the facilities bond. And it's important to highlight that the parcel tax that we just revoked, for the library, is the equivalent of Measure S. And we went back out and asked for money, and people said, well, wait a minute, I'm sorry, the parcel tax. The parcel tax provides funding for operations. For capital improvements. Now, we needed that bond for capital improvements. And I think that a decent portion of our populace is sophisticated enough to understand that differentiation.
Yeah.
So that's something that I would encourage.
No, we'll hold off, get you back together again in chart, get the presentation ready to go, and then we won't go to council with the results, and we kind of hold off a little bit until we get there. I think, I hear what you're saying. It's fine.
And also, that was another point, having been involved with a lot of urban initiatives with the local community committee, which can advocate and can utilize informational materials provided by the city. So there's a lot you can do to provide information in a manner that, while not advocating, points out necessity.
Yeah.
And then a local committee, of which probably many of the people on this committee were allowed to be, would be interested in being on, can then utilize that informational material in a formulated advocacy.
So for our request from before, it would be to streamline the presentation. Perhaps, as Rich suggested, use pages 18 through 22 to establish a wording platform on why this change is necessary, and then report back the community engagement findings, 31 through 32, a report back our committee consensus results from 34, and then we create a page with the historical, arborist, and structural report that they were able to dig up, and then create a new grid summarizing 37 more effectively for us to clearly illustrate from baseline A, B, and C what the options, losses, and potential are, so that it can be easily cross-referenced with the community engagement results to clearly highlight which ones are community priorities and what the differences between C and results. So I think that report for next, so that ideally that report would be concise, would demonstrate the need, the results, and where the vision forward would go to present ideally at the November 5th. And in that case, if before we come up with something and we're not able to meet in advance, we can all do it by email. So 2 weeks from now is October 16th. The council agenda packet for November 5th will be released on October 30th. So there's like the tail end of a week, and then the week of the 20th, and a little bit in the following week. So there's some wiggle room in there where they have their 2 weeks to do what they need to do, working with staff, and then we can meet, and then we still have time to get it ready for the council packet.
Do you suggest actually meeting or like an email option?
What would you prefer? I don't know if you have a thought, but I mean, it's definitely hard to get to a consensus with this big of a group.
Just to me, I would set up a subcommittee because, you know, there's two or three of you that are interested in other position message that they would share the group, or we can get back together. But I think the email is just, it's too hard to get all talking in context and that sort of thing.
It does take us a while, but I feel like we're very collaborative and productive together. Having it available on email for us to use at our leisure gives us time to put together some notes. But again, if we meet and find that we want to edit, just directions.
What we do meet, do you have Route 4 or are we maxed out on meeting? So it would just be us, is that right?
Potentially, yes. We have a little contingency in the contract that might cover an additional meeting to check and see.
So I'm just trying to figure out how's the best way to sync up between if they're available and when we're available.
If we're out of meetings with them, they can send us project. We can just look at it, notes, we discuss it, and then we write down whatever our final edits might be. Ideally, everything's perfect, I'm super happy. But we can always write down our edits, and ideally it should be relatively minimal by that time point and send it into them. Like I feel like they've probably heard a lot. I mean, I think that's fine. I think you see tonight they're here, but they're listening. They don't have, it's a conversation that we're having. So I don't know that we necessarily need them and we're trying to decide and we're giving it back to them. So I think that works.
So is everybody willing to get together again?
If we can pick a date.
Yeah,
on our calendars.
Do you want me to email everybody to see what your availability is, or you want to? I mean,
Sounds like it's going to be a Thursday, probably at 7.
I mean, yes, and
So,
I have a little matrix, and this Thursday is the best, but
Yeah.
I think should be.
we should have a couple Thursdays that might work.
I mean, there's only so many days, right?
Yeah.
If they won't have us available till the 16th, but the only Thursday available.
No, sorry.
Why could we not use a 30? That's what gets us in.
They get the packet.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it has to be I think that it's maybe for too many people to look at our calendars at once. I can put on a little survey and you can just check. Right. That way we can get it all. See what's that's.
It sounds like a Thursday. I don't know, Kathy, we throw in a wild card, not a Thursday.
Yeah, I'll look back. I mean, I think there's a Tuesday, there's one or two people that can't do it, but could maybe do it. Like I already.
The schedule, they're kind of, at least they're outdated. Like,
Yeah, so I'll just,
been a year.
I'll just send I'll just resend whatever that was I sent.
So when you can always look at when the pretty much between when they have results on 16th.
Yeah,
that's only 2 weeks, so within those 2 weeks,
what do we do? Yeah, I'll send out a little poll.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get it a few days before. Yes, yeah.
few days before.
Yeah.
To give time to review. I'm thinking we might be meeting like the beginning of the next week, but again, Todd is out to the 23rd, so we'll figure it out. Okay. So I think that for the sake of our sanity and our time, that we should move on. I don't think we officially moved on to agenda item 5, but we did, so I need to see if there's any public comments on agenda item 5, unless there are any comments. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is communications, committee member communications. There are any communications from committee members. No. Staff communications, no. We have no continued public comment. So with no further items or comments from staff or members, I will now adjourn the meeting at 9:06 p.m. to our next meeting. Well, our next regular meeting is November 6th, but we will reschedule. Thank you.
Next time.